Thank you, everyone, for waiting. We would like to begin the Creative Forum that has been sponsored by National Center for Art, Well Research and Tokyo National University of Fine Arts and Music, and also co-sponsored by the British Consul. The title is Creative Forum, Art, Health and Wellbeing at the Museums, Learning from UK. And I am the MC today, Learning Group Leader from the National Center for Art Research. My name is Akiko Ichijo. Nice to meet you all. And we received a lot of participants from various areas today. And today we have 100 people present in this venue physically. And actually, there has been 4 times more than the number of the seats available. And online, there has been about 1,400 people who have registered to participate online, not only from Japan, but from 25 countries around the world. Thank you very much. I think it shows that the topic that we're taking up today is not only an interesting topic for the Japanese, but a very global topic of interest. We would now like to begin, and there will be an opening speech from the sponsors. It will be she is the director of the National Center for Art Research, Ms. Mami Kataoka, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mami Kataoka, director from the National Center for Art Research. We are joined by many people today. And as Ichijo-san just mentioned a moment ago, there are 1,400 people who have registered and are participating online in this event. Art, health, and well-being. The relationship between these things during the pandemic, it was identified. It's not just about physical health, it's about your mindfulness, your health mentally. That kind of well-being is something that there is considerable focus on now around the world. The majority of our participants this time, I'm sure, have felt that through the pandemic, and that's one of their motivations for being here. It's a really great time for us here at the National Center for Art Research, as well as Tokyo University of the Arts, as well as with the support of the British Council. Being able to hold this forum is a very wonderful thing. The National Center for Art Research, at the end of March this year, we were established. I'm sure a few of you haven't heard of our name so much, so let me just briefly introduce us to you. So our mission is about connecting, deepening, and expanding art. We're called a research center, but it's not just research for research's sake. It's looking at promoting a variety of art. This is a new base within the country. That's what we're trying to become. We're working with domestic as well as overseas museums, galleries, as well as other research locations to try and connect various people across society to create a platform for art activities and to contribute to international art activities as well as sustainable development. So we are the independent administrative institution National Museum of Art, and there are 6 museums and 1 film archive that's associated here within this institution. Each of them has unique and different histories. Back in 1959, our first National Museum of Western Art was opened here in Japan. Subsequent to that, we had the National Museum of Modern Art in Kyoto. That is 1967, that it's established separate from the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. And apologies, the National Museum of Western Art was established in 1959. And this was to do with the returning of the Matsukata collection to Japan from France. And in 1977, the National Museum of Art. This is part of the Osaka Expo that this was created. Subsequently, in 2001, the National Museum of Art Independent Administration Institution was established, and subsequently, where we are today, the National Art Center for Tokyo was established. And independent from the National Museum of Modern Art Tokyo, we had in 2018 the National Film Archive of Japan. And we also had the National Crafts Museum, which transferred from Tokyo to Kanazawa. Within that context, how are we trying to achieve and realize this mission? We're trying to do this on many fronts. That's what's needed from us. Currently, we're focused on 4 key areas of activities. That is the promotion of utilization of museum collections. This is working with primarily the National Museum's collections to look at leveraging domestic collections within Japan. In order to do that, we compile and disseminate information on art in Japan. If you take a look at the website, we have a database called Shuzo Collections. This is currently limited to art that's located in Japan, but it's a database of our collections. It's available in English and in Japanese. We also develop international relations and networks. This is something that due to the COVID pandemic, where we had to put a halt on international exchange, has become important again now. And our 4th area of activity is enhancing learning. Today's symposium is planned by our learning group. We have speakers joining us, many speakers coming here from overseas. It's about creating international networks, and hopefully we're contributing to that. We're doing all these activities for a variety of different targets. This time, it's the first time that we are engaging in this large-scale program. We've been preparing 6 months for this, and going forward, we have a number of associated programs. It is wonderful to be able to commence such a program in this way. Today is going to be a long day for everyone. I appreciate that, but I hope that you will be able to fully leverage this opportunity by joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kataoka. Next, I would like to call on the President of Tokyo University of the Arts, President Katsuhiko Hibino.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Hibino from the Tokyo University of the Arts. And as Ms. Kataoka, head of NCAR, said, the symposium today is organized in collaboration together with NCAR and the Tokyo University of the Arts. And at the Tokyo University of the Arts, the theme of today, well-being in the arts, is something that we have started working on 7 years ago. We are going to be celebrating our 140th anniversary quite soon. And in society, we have experienced a pandemic and other social problems. In such an era, we believe that the role that art has to play needs to be revisited as a theme. And so we have been incorporating the idea of welfare and well-being into our classes. At the Tokyo University of the Arts, to take this even further, we have established a co-creation platform project. And this platform is the contact point for the co-creation forum that we are holding today. Ms. Kataoka showed you many slides from NCAR. And I had thought of preparing some slides myself. However, the slide is up on my T-shirt up here. So I thought it might be a nice idea if I projected the slides on my T-shirt, but no. Thank you for doing a close-up. You can see the name here, Geijutsu Mirai Kenkyujo, or Art Future Research Center. We established the center in April of this year. And Kenkyujo usually means research institute, but we wanted this to be more of a venue where a lot of people gather together to think about art's future. And so one of the programs that this research center or research venue does is this art-based communication platform for co-creation. So we have high expertise from various corporations and universities. We want to bring all of those stakeholders together in this research venue. So the timing of us establishing the research venue actually coincided with NCAR's initiatives. And so these two platforms work together to start the symposium that we are having today. Also, with the help of the British Council, we have been able to invite many speakers from the UK. The UK is one step or two steps advanced compared to Japan in terms of well-being and art. And so over the course of today, we want to be listening to those advanced good practices and case studies. And we hope that we will be able to learn a lot from those learnings. Last night, the speakers arrived in Japan, and we had some time to speak with them. And so we have incorporated various accessibility features into the symposium. We will be having a very compact, densely packed agenda. But in the latter part of today's session, we have a roundtable discussion session where we hope to be incorporating various knowledge and wisdom from the UK speakers. So as an organizer, I myself am very much looking forward to the time. And so looking forward to today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor and President Hibino. And we'd like to go on next to the co-sponsors greeting. Director, Mr. Matthew Knowles, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to speak in English, so I encourage you to unwind your headsets and tune into channel 1. I also have no slides, and my slides are not on my t-shirt, but I have prepared a few remarks. Firstly, let me say how delighted we are at the British Council to see such a great gathering and to have the chance to come together in this way. This forum is a way of glimpsing the strength of the friendship and partnership between Japan and the UK. And one of the special qualities of that friendship is the opportunity we have to draw on shared values. And I think as we come to challenging issues, we can really take advantage of those shared values, thinking together about how we promote longer, healthier, happier lives. But as we bring our cultures together, we also draw on the strength of our differences, on the diverse experiences, on the diverse expertise in both countries. And we also hope that those differences will help to yield new insight as we discuss health and aging, well-being, and social isolation. Katsuhiro mentioned that the University of the Arts in Tokyo has been looking at these issues for 7 years. At the British Council, we've been looking at them for around the same amount of time, perhaps 7 or 8 years. And we've been developing a range of exchange programs to give our health professionals, our arts professionals, our academics, the chance to explore these issues. We've created a number of programs that give delegations of UK experts the chance to come and spend time in Japan, and vice versa. We've created opportunities for representatives of the cultural sectors in Japan to spend time in the UK. Perhaps if diversity is one of the ingredients of cultural exchange and cultural relations, time is another magic ingredient. We've also run a range of projects to create opportunities for the UK's cultural institutions to share some of their methodologies. And in a moment, I'll welcome our special guests today. To give you one example of a project, we worked with the London Symphony Orchestra and enabled them to model some of their work with communities. And there was a group from the London Symphony Orchestra that came and worked delivering a music-making workshop at one of the care homes in Tokyo called Shukoen. There was a lady called Bunsan there who had recently been moved into residential care, and she was feeling quite estranged from her family, and she was also feeling lonely in a new community. But at the age of 100, she decided to participate in this music-making workshop. And her family reported that it really lifted her spirits, and it helped her to connect with a new community. And for many weeks and months after, she was able to relive and share the memories. We feel that those types of programs, the programs that bring creativity in all of its strength to some of our most challenging questions, have an incredibly positive impact. And her positive experience of the workshop contributed to an improvement in her health. At the start of a forum like this, we all know the unique power of the arts. We know the power of the arts to reflect our shared experience, to help us express ideas and emotions, to help inspire creativity and build community. But it's going to be so exciting. It's going to be so exciting to see the different ways in which we are all harnessing the power of the arts to improve health and well-being. In closing, let me briefly introduce the four people who have flown a very long way and suffered the loss of their baggage to be with us. So don't judge them too heavily for the clothes they're wearing. They're embracing slightly new versions of themselves this morning. First, we have Jane from Dulwich Picture Gallery. We have Ruth from Manchester Art Gallery. We have Carol from National Museums, Liverpool. And we have Mark from the Tate, each with provocative questions to ask you and provocative experiences to share. Finally, I want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank Mami and colleagues at the National Centre for Art Research, and Katsuhiko-san and colleagues at Tokyo University of the Arts, and all of those around us who've worked to make this forum possible. I hope at the end of today you go away with some new inspiration, and I hope in time we will also see that we've planted some new seeds of collaboration. Thank you very much.
ノールズ駐日代表ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthew Knowles from the British Council. I would now like to move on to
イギリス英国より
some of the four panelists that we have arrived from the UK. We also have a panelist today from Japan. We're going to hear a variety of different topics discussed today.
これから皆様お一人お一人に話を
So, we're going to be hearing from each of our speakers in a moment, but to start the day, I'm going to be inviting,
ちょっと立ち上がっていただいて
before the speeches, each of the five panelists, if you'd like to stand up, turn round, face the venue, give everyone a wave, let them know that you're here.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Please retake your seats.
それでは、この競争フォーラム全体
With that, we'd like to look at the opening program for the Creative Forum. We're going into Inspiration Talk number 1.
を務めますのは
Today's moderator
主任研究員
is the senior curator from the National Museum of Art, National Centre for Art Research, Ms. Sawako Inaniwa. If she'd like to take the stage, please. Good morning, everyone.
今ご紹介いただきました
Thank you for the warm words of introduction. My name is Inaniwa from the National Centre for Art Research. I am participating today as moderator for today's Creative Forum, but first, this creative forum today. We have so many people from such diverse backgrounds. We have online, possibly people joining us in the middle of the night or very, very early in the morning, depending on which countries they're located. Today, we're joined by 4 speakers from the UK, and we also have Fujioka-san, one speaker from Japan, who are going to be presenting later. So we're going to be hearing about differences in the background to activities in Japan and the UK, and we'll be talking about some of those themes as we proceed through the day. So I'd like to begin with my first slide. So I wanted to begin with the background and purpose of the forum as well as the agenda for today. So you've all seen this visual. I'm sure this was something that enticed you to apply to join today. Art, health, and well-being. The combination of these 3 things, perhaps this is why you were motivated to join us today and hear our conversations. It's quite a fun illustration, as you can see here, quite whimsical. And I'm very honored that we have so many people here joining us. I think the power of the illustration is something that has definitely been effective. But just to look ahead to the word well-being. Well-being, I think, is a fairly new word for many of us. Well-being is, of course, an English word. Well, meaning good, being, relating to condition. So combined, it becomes well-being. And in Japanese, in katakana, we're starting to hear well-being, well-being being spoken about quite a lot since 2015, when the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, were first talked about. I think particularly in the context of education and social welfare, it's a bit of a buzzword, I guess. In today's talks, I'm sure that well-being is something that's going to become a key word. So talking about health and well-being. When we think about health, up to now, we've talked about sleep, nutrition, exercise. Make sure you get your sleep, make sure you eat well and you exercise and you'll be healthy. That was the concept. But that's in the 20th century, I think. Now that we've moved on, we have mind and emotion. We also have relationships and connections with community, which is also an aspect of health and well-being. That, I think, is something that links to art, which we're talking about today. So talking about art and cultural activities to engage with improving health and well-being, I think this is a new shift that we're seeing internationally. When we think about where we work in the museum sector, how do we engage with that? In that context, that's why we have, from the UK, looking at these 20 years since we've been in the 21st century, there's been a great deal of activity happening. And for Japan, I think this is of great reference to us. So we have similar social challenges like an aging society. So I think the example of the UK is something that we can look at to lead us through our discussion. So first of all, I wanted to look at recognizing and responding to changes in society. In the past 20 years or so, there have been changes and shifts. The public sector, I think, has struggled to keep up with some of those changes in the Japanese context. So how do we respond to that is a challenge that we face. And in order to face that challenge, we have to create new perceptions together. What is the challenge now? What are our strengths to meet that? How do we bring those strengths together so that we can take the next step? Talking about the background, I tried to identify a few things. In some of the documents that you have on your tables, you'll have these slides in front of you too, I believe. First of all, in terms of changes in society, we have the super aging society. as well as coping with chronic conditions and illnesses. Whether it's dementia or other illnesses or conditions, there are these long-term conditions, things that can't quickly be fixed through surgery or medicines. You still have to maintain a high quality of life while living with these conditions, and those times are becoming longer. So thinking about traditional medical systems, they are not necessarily enough to cope with that. In line with that, there are increases in social security costs. And there is undesirable loneliness and isolation that people have to deal with. I think this is really important, but what is health? It's a change in our concept of what healthiness is. Health itself, as I mentioned earlier, is not just sleep, nutrition, exercise. Now we think about something that is beyond the physical, beyond the anatomical. It's about the society that surrounds a person and how you connect with it, or the community that you're part of. So health is created from those things too, is the way our concept of health is changing too. Additionally, I've identified here shared goals globally, SDGs, and well-being is something that is cited within the SDGs. In Japan, since 2015 onward, the SDGs have gained a great deal of awareness. In educational fields, a lot of children are aware of those key words, and well-being is cited there. So in Japan, we've used the word shiawase, meaning happiness, but it's not about being happy. Well-being is about having respect for the individual, being connected to society, to have motivation to live and to live their daily lives. I think that's what's embedded into the concept. It's not simply happy or happiness, because that's more of a short-term condition. Well-being is more of a longer condition. And in there is also awareness of raising awareness for human rights. In the past few years, we've had Black Lives Matter and #MeToo. So this awareness of human rights is something that gradually in Japan things are shifting towards too. And this is also connecting to the concept of health. And in that context, well, what about art? How can art play a role in society? Art has always been a very social presence. But if we identify scientific evidence to see how engaging with art can contribute to and improve someone's well-being or promoted their health, research to secure such evidence is now well underway. Earlier, I was talking about the change in the concept of what health is. So where does health come from? What determines health? So I've borrowed this website information here on this slide. So the healthcare sector has been in existence for some time, but that's not only it. There's also the community, there's also the environment that an individual lives in, as well as their economic situation, as well as their education and any inequalities that might be associated there. These all are determinants of health. It's not about the individual. There is a great weight placed upon social aspects to determine health of an individual. And it's important that we focus on those aspects. That's part of the updated concept surrounding health. So thinking about health, community, human dignity, as we see these changes in conceptual approaches, thinking about what kind of techniques or technology might support that, one of those things is arts and museums and culture. I think in Japan, this is still a concept that is very new. With today's forum that we're holding, art, health, well-being is the theme that we've chosen for this forum. And when you mention that, we get a lot of questions about, well, what does that mean? That art can support people's health, communities, and human dignity. we are going to create that awareness so that museums can adapt to changing societies. So thinking about museums, in the past there would be a collection. People who loved arts would go to view those collections, those works and pieces. That was one approach, but additional to that, I think it's more about becoming a forum, a place where dialogue can take place, where new ideas can be born, that you can just relax in those spaces, that you can be inspired to have something new arise in your mind, some new thoughts and ideas, to have that kind of creative thinking. So museums as forums, I think that's what is being needed from us right now. When we think about what a museum should be, to have this dialogue type forum. Originally, museums were almost temples, that they're very important. We contain these important things. We're here to show you these important objects. But it's more about shifting toward people gathering together to have a dialogue. And that is what museums should be. And I think there is a general international shift toward that. So based on that premise, we can talk about what art activities can happen in that context. So today, you should have in front of you in some of the documents I think that you have. For those of you who are joining online, I believe you're able to download these documents. So the first document I'd like to draw your attention to is this, Creative Health. A very attractive and enticing illustration again on the cover here. This is from an all-party parliamentary group in the UK. More than 200 pages talking about the arts and health for well-being. It's a report. So this is the abbreviated version. I believe this is about 20 pages or so, and it's available as a UK version. Now, this report, I understand, has been very impactful in the UK sphere. We have a Japanese language version that has been translated for everyone to enjoy. So please do take the opportunity to read this later on. It's very clear, telling us about in which sectors, what things are happening, what things are being considered, what practices are being put into place. It's very concise and very clear. Next, I'd like to draw your attention to this. This is a little bulkier as a document, but again, it's downloadable for your availability. It's available in both Japanese and English. This is back in 2022 from the Bearing Foundation. Creatively Minded at the Museum is the title of this. It's talking particularly about mental health and how we support mental health for those who face challenges in that field, how we create programs in museums for people who have those challenges through art, creating and using museum as a space, something that hasn't really been engaged with so far in terms of mental illnesses, but to create a program together with those who face those challenges, and there are 16 examples cited within this. So as you read that, you see that health is not just about physical, catching a cold or other physical challenge, but that it is also a mental topic as well, and how we can engage with that. There are some good examples written in here. Inside this Creatively Minded at the Museum, one thing that's cited is social prescribing. That's actually a phrase that's used in many places in this document, and social prescribing is something that is very broadly spread out now in the UK. If you think about a prescription for medicines, instead of that, you get from a doctor social prescription. It's about finding a connection with society, something that will trigger a communication or connection. It's a prescription to help make that connection. And museum programs become social prescriptions. So, very soon we're going to be hear from our presentation speakers. We are joined by panelists from Manchester, Liverpool, and London. First, we have with us Ruth Edson from Manchester Art Gallery. She's going to be telling us about what's happening in Manchester right now. We're then going to hear from Ms. Carol Rogers regarding House of Memories. It's been ongoing for 10 years. It's a very well-known project. And I'm sure many people who have joined this forum particularly want to hear about this. So I'm sure Carol will be able to tell us about research outcomes from the past decade of the House of Memories. And from Mr. Mark Miller, we're going to hear about examples from the Tate in the field of social welfare and care. How are these handled in the museum context? And in the second half of today, we shift into our dialogue session. We have from London's Dulwich Picture Gallery, Jane Findlay, and also from the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum, Hayato Fujioka. The dialogue session will be moderated by myself and also Professor Ito from the Tokyo University of the Arts. Those of you here in the forum physically will be joining in that dialogue, answering this question, as well as those online will be having the opportunity to engage with this question. That's it from me for the moment. That is the flow for today's Creative Forum. With that, I would like to invite our first inspiration talker to the stage, Ms. Ruth Edson. If you'd like to step up to the stage, please.
So thank you for spending 14 hours of travel to get here.
Thank you so much for having us here today. It's wonderful to be here. My presentation today is entitled Making Art Do the Work, Finding Solutions to Health Inequalities in Manchester Through Art, Partnership and Research. My name's Ruth Edson. I'm the Learning Manager for Communities at Manchester Art Gallery. And today I'm going to talk about two pieces of work. So this is going to be a brief snapshot of two large pieces. So do talk to me afterwards, talk to me throughout the day, or do contact me afterwards if you'd like more details. So the two pieces of work I'm going to talk about are one's at Manchester Art Gallery and one's at Platt Hall. They're both part of Manchester City Council's cultural portfolio, so we are the same organisation but two different venues. And you can see one is in the city centre of Manchester and the second is in the south of the city. As you can see, it's 14 minutes in the car, so it's not far. Both of these pieces of work are very much in response to Manchester City Council's Making Manchester Fairer's health strategy. And this is very much about tackling health inequalities in Manchester, and there's 8 key focus areas. Now, this work has been going on for a long time, but this particular strategy has been developed in the aftermath of the pandemic. And the pieces of work, the 5 areas out of the 8 that are particularly prominent for this work is around enhancing community power, lifting low incomes out of poverty and debt, cutting unemployment, fighting systemic and structural discrimination, and the prevention of ill health and preventable diseases. So to introduce the first piece of work, I've got a 1-minute film. And so this project's called Uncertain Futures, and I'll talk about it after the film.
So many women have suffered discrimination.
Statistics shows that in Manchester, it is the highest number of over 50s who are unemployed.
We've interviewed 100 women. Some of them have left very emotional. It's probably been the first time in their lives that they found a space where somebody has valued their opinion and their experience.
I haven't passed my sell-by date. There's still a lot that I want to do. There's still a lot that I can do. There's still a lot that I've planned to do.
as women who have come together, we won't lose that strength that we have built.
We feel empowered. We are ready to go. We want to hit the ground running.
Women over 50 still have a lot to offer, and our future most certainly not uncertain if we choose to do something about it.
So I hope that gives you just a 1-minute snapshot of the Uncertain Futures project. Uncertain Futures is a constituent-led, co-curated art and research project, and we've, right from the beginning, have talked about it as art as research, research as art. So the whole thing is one piece of art. And it's been very much driven by need. I'm going to now just give you a snapshot of the 3 phases. It's been running since 2019. And it's a very long-term investment on behalf of Manchester Art Gallery, but also the universities, the lead artist, Suzanne Lacey, and the advisory group, the partners. So to do this work, I just really want to emphasise that it needs to have a long-term commitment. It isn't a quick piece of work, and it's very much an investment. So how did it all start? So back in 2019, under the directorship of Alistair Hudson, who was the director at Manchester Art Gallery at the time, American artist Suzanne Lacey, who is a socially engaged pioneer artist who works particularly around issues around women, ageing and work, was due to have a retrospective at Manchester Art Gallery and the Whitworth Art Gallery. And it was coming from the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco, and it was called We Are Here. And we started to think about how we wanted this retrospective to make sense in Manchester. And I started to have conversations with Suzanne on the phone around what needs to be made visible for older women in Manchester. I was doing a lot of ageing work at the time, and I started to talk to communities that I was working with. I did a lot of consultation with academics and also a brilliant organisation called Manchester Institute of Research, a collaborative research on ageing, which is part of the University of Manchester. And I started asking this question, what needs to be made visible for older women in Manchester? And inequalities around work and pensions kept on coming to the fore, whether it was issues around the menopause, whether it was issues around redundancies and retraining, and then a lot of issues about the pension age going up to 66. And so through the Collaborative Research on Ageing Network, I started to work with 2 academics, Dr. Elaine Dewhurst from the University of Manchester, who's part of the School of Law, and her specialism is ageing and employment, and Dr. Sarah Campbell from Manchester Metropolitan University, and her specialism is health and care and working in the caring, the field of caring. I also, with Sarah and Elaine, we did 10 focus groups across the city talking to different communities, whether that was with work clubs or Good Neighbours organisations, an organisation called Breakthrough, which is around supporting people with disability and work. So 10 different focus groups. And then and also working with Suzanne, thinking about what this artwork would be like. So in 2020, obviously all our plans were having to pause because of COVID, but actually COVID and Black Lives Matter actually brought work and racial inequalities to the fore. And so we started to meet weekly online with some of the leaders of the focus groups, and we met every Wednesday with Suzanne. So COVID actually was our friend in this sense, that we started to actually meet online, and as Atia, who was in the film, said, it's put the microphone into our hands. We can actually talk about these things now. We spent a lot of time thinking about who's missing from what was going to become the advisory group, and so we recruited new people. And so this picture is the advisory group on the very first time they met in face-to-face after a year of meeting online outside the gallery. So during the pandemic, they started to think about what did we want to research? What do we want to know about women over 50 and work, and why? And then in 2021, we spent a lot of time recruiting 100 women to be interviewed in a live art piece of work in the gallery. And you can see here that this is how the booth was. We recruited 100 women. The interview started in June and finished in September. And each woman had an hour's slot to be interviewed and talk about their experience of work. Every interviewed was then transcribed and anonymised and then put on the wall for visitors to read. The advisory group also made a sound piece about their experience as well. We also had an informal programme called Chai and Chat, which the advisory group led on, and then a very focused, bookable programme of 7 sessions around accessing work, particularly around issues around menopause, pensions, etc. Phase 2 was a big celebratory dinner. Now, Suzanne loves to bring people together, and that's very much part of the artwork. It was a celebration, it was a thank you, but it was also a networking opportunity for the 100 women who were interviewed separately to come together, and it was a fantastic night. You can see an image here. A small group of 4 out of the advisory group joined the 2 academics to then start analysing the 100 interviews. We then had a second iteration of the gallery space, which showed the findings and the process. And also, we won an award that year, which was a great achievement for the advisory group. The final phase, which is the phase we're in now, is presentations, events, articles. But we've also been working very closely with Suzanne to create a final artwork. So it's a package, an archive and an artwork. So we've taken some of the 100 interviews and made a film. And also we're in the process of making a documentary and finishing the finding report, which is going to be launched in November. Then in 2024, there'll be a final installation in the gallery showing the art film, and we've got a series of events across the city. So going back to 2019, why was this such an issue in terms of health care for women in Manchester? So 37% of 50 to 64-year-old residents were claiming ill health or out of work, which is quite high in statistics nationally. There was a large number of people claiming employment support allowance through mostly mental health concerns. The pension age had gone up, and that meant that if you were out of work or claiming allowances or support, you were then claiming them for longer until you could get your state pension. Manchester also has a high number of non-UK born 50 to 64-year-olds, and this should increase people working, but actually statistics showed that it didn't because of discrimination. And here you can see a map of the city, but you can also see that 45% of people are claiming support through mental health. So the research question was very much, what are the inequalities facing women over 50 in relation to paid and unpaid work? And why were we doing this in the gallery? Well, it was very much around creating a forum, a dialogue, and being less performative. Seeing Manchester Art Gallery as a civic space and collaborating with partners in the city and very much responding to need rather than always asking other people to participate in our projects, our displays, our exhibitions. It was very much turning that round and seeing what the need was in the city and then creating these collaborative spaces. It's a participatory research method with very much all 4 groups being equal. So Suzanne being the lead artist, Manchester Art Gallery in terms of production and coordination, the advisory group, and then the research team. The advisory group have been absolutely fundamental in the success of the project. They're all community leaders. They've all got a huge amount of trust with communities. We have fundraised for this, and each advisory group member has received an engagement fee for each phase. So these women, most of these women are running their own programs in the city. So it seemed it was really important, and we've spent quite a lot of time thinking about how the women in the advisory group have been paid. It's been quite transparent, it's been quite open, and rather than people doing it for free, it's I mean, there's a couple of women who are salaried in this which haven't taken a fee, but anybody who isn't salaried has had a fee. This is the research matrix that the women in the advisory group developed, and it very much is looking at race, migration, gender, class, disability and age. And this chart has kind of actually guided us through, really. These are the 100 women who were recruited, and as you can see, it's a very diverse range of women with very different experiences, but it was very, very intentional. We spent hours with a spreadsheet looking at exactly who we wanted to be recruited, who we knew, who would be helpful, and it's a very rich and diverse data pool for the academics. As I said, there's been 3 iterations, or there will be by 2024, and just having this space in the gallery, it's a very public space. It's a space that everybody has to walk through. So it's really changed the dynamic in the gallery. I'm not going to spend too long talking about the findings, but the findings are really important. Why are older women poorer in Manchester? So there's 3 areas, really. Fragmented working lives. Women tend to be the main carers, caring for older relatives, caring for partners, caring for adult children, and caring for grandchildren. And breaks in unemployment have a huge impact on pension. And there's a lot of disparity in pension, especially if you have migrated to the UK, especially going through the asylum system. So the next point is very much about what we've called the volunteering trap, that a lot of women who have migrated desperately want to work in their 50s and 60s, but there's ageism, but also problems in terms of finding it hard. One woman talked in the interviews about every time she went for an interview being told that she didn't have local experience. She had experience from her positions in Zimbabwe, but it wasn't local. And so you end up volunteering to try and find work, but then end up in this trap of volunteering or on short-term contracts or 0-hour contracts. And then there's a lot of reports of intersectional discrimination based on race and age, gender, migration status. The impact of being interviewed is something that I just don't want to overlook. So the actual 100 women, there was a whole care package, and it was very important for women to speak out about their situation. I've just taken a couple of quotes here. And also the impact on visitors. We've done a lot of tours, we've done a lot of sessions, community sessions. This is a quote from a doctor who came on a tour, who said that she spends a lot of time with patients who are over 50, and she had this appreciation of listening and reading some of people's experiences. So just before I finish talking about uncertain futures, there's 3 points of legacy. There's the use of the documentary, the recommendations, the manifesto for the advisory group, but also for the 100 women. And the more I've got to know the 100 women, the more they want to use this data, these resources within their own lives. So this confidence of highlighting these issues, but also the relationship they have with the gallery is really key. So this new relationship with the gallery, and the advisory group are really keen to continue. They want to go to the Houses of Parliament. They want to continue as a social enterprise in their own right. From a research and policy legacy, the researchers are using this data. They really actually want to tune in and do another piece of work around volunteering and pension. And then they're also using it with their students and peers and speaking at academic conferences. And then from a gallery point of view, there's an ongoing trust and relationship with the community partners, plus the 100 women, and ongoing commitment to making social change in the city. But also the Uncertain Futures film, documentary and archive will hopefully be part of Manchester Art Gallery's collection, which we're 200 years old this year, so it will be part of our collection for decades to come. And then Suzanne Lacey is very keen to show Uncertain Futures internationally with other pieces of her work. So that's a snapshot of Uncertain Futures. The next piece of work I'm going to talk about is quite different. It's social prescription work at Platt Hall. And to introduce Platt Hall, I've got a short piece of film. So that gave you a little bit of text and visualization of Platt Hall. So the project that, since Platt Hall stopped being the Gallery of Costume, and we're in this in-between phase, we're calling it Platt Hall In Between. And it's about exploring the past and the future to imagine new possibilities for this landmark building. We're working with local residents, communities, partners to transform Platt Hall into a vital and creative space at the heart of its local neighbourhood. It's a diverse area. It's ethnically diverse, socially and economically, with parts of each ward that surround the hall being in England's most deprived areas. It includes South Asian, Africa, Caribbean, white British communities alongside smaller Eastern European, Somali and Kurdish groups, and a large student population. So the universities are just up the road, so a lot of students and people live together in this quite dense housing that you can see on the map. Our programme is based on how activities meet local need now and how they inform the hall's future to meet need in the future. And we take a very hyper-local, interactive approach that begins with being present, initiating conversations, listening and learning. So it's very much a piece of active research for us as a team with communities. And you can see here, this was one from our first consultation sessions. It's very much about people, place and collections being very equal in everything we do. So the Platt Hall Social Prescription Programme is about understanding and addressing the complex intersectional barriers to equality of opportunity. And we're working in partnership with key local services from health and housing, education and employment to contribute to the network of agencies. I don't think Platt could do anything by themselves at all. It's very much working with partners to make change. And for people to be able to use Platt Hall, which is a beautiful building, in a new way. So the social prescription team is made up of Platt Hall, which is community managers like myself, but also curators and the collection team are very, very involved. And we've made that decision that we're all involved in this rather than just the learning team. And our partners, our key partners, are a doctor's practice, Robert Derbyshire, Sure Start, which I'll tell you about in a moment, volunteer community groups, and because we're positioned in a park, we work very closely with the Friends of Plattfields Park and the social engagement work that they do. So I'm going to just play a film now that introduces the social prescription programme.
part of it will be a social prescription angle, so people can come here for health reasons, for their well-being, and to get a bit of exercise, talk to people, socialise, and all of these things that people are getting referred to from the GPs and the doctors.
I'm a social prescriber, one of two, at the Robert Derbyshire practice. It's a really large practice in Rusholme, and it's situated about 10 minutes walk from Platt Hall. A lot of people actually present at the GP practice with problems that really have a non-medical cause, like they could be unhappy because they're in bad housing, or relationship problems, or they're very lonely.
To be able to speak to a patient and know that we can refer them to garden space, they do Zoom chats, to have that and know that it's a reliable community resource. During lockdown, they've pretty much been the main service in this area that's reached out to us and been consistent, and that has actually helped the patients. They all enjoy it.
It ticks all the boxes really, that we know it improves mental health and physical health. There's lots of people around here who don't know Platt Hall, so it's a great opportunity to engage them with what's on their doorstep.
So that was actually made towards the end of the pandemic, but things have really moved on since then. And we have 6-week courses, a walk and talks programme, and then we have a monthly collection chat that used to be online but now is face-to-face, weekly Platt Hall gardening, and our weekly Sure Start Play and Stay. Our referral pathways are varied actually, so we do have a prescription route through the GP service, and this is followed by a phone call from myself, and then with consent, and then we introduce them to the programme. But we also have partner recruitment and self-referrals. So one of the key things that started our social prescription was something that we've called collection chats, and I'm going to let a couple of the people who come to collection chats introduce it now.
I only moved here about a month before the lockdown. I'm still learning to fit in, and the experience with Platt Hall has been helpful with that. The way they've set it up is that there are 100 objects on the website, and the idea is that you choose 2 of these and they're up for discussion. They tend to have a theme very often, and you just expand on these particular objects. They're a basis for discussion. Many years ago, I used to carry around something like this in my pocket. And
the nice thing about the collection at Platt is that we don't know everything. We're not the experts, and often they've come into the hall and there's a lot of mystery around that object. Actually, through those conversations, we discover more ourselves.
I think maybe they are a family.
Yeah, the youngest child and the middle one and the mommy, yeah.
It's just a mystery every time that what we're going to see this time and what we're going to learn this time. Ruth asked me to select 2 objects for the discussion, and I did that, and it was amazing because some of the objects I used to see in Pakistan, it recalled my memories.
I have a contribution to make, but I believe that other people they may look at it in a totally different way. And I think that's good for community.
And so collection chats went from being online to being face-to-face and are through referrals. So this quote here, I learned about the hall in my previous session that were recommended by my GP. I feel that the hall is a good safe space for the community and the way it's helping people of all walks of life. This evolved into 6-week courses which are very focused around a particular health need. So pre-diabetes, weight management, and self-care and well-being. And we've ran a few of these 6-week courses and are continuing to do so. And then this has also evolved into the use of the park. So we run something called walk and talks, which start at the hall and then we walk. We're working with the physio team at Robert Derbyshire. This is a nice quote from somebody who's recently been part of Walk and Talks. I've been isolated as a long-distance lorry driver, socially anxious, and this was scary. but it's been really helpful being with people, looking at artefacts. And he was somebody who was incredibly nervous in the first week and hardly spoke. And actually, he found that using objects meant that he could talk more about his experience and not have to talk about himself so directly. Our programme with Sure Start, which is the UK-wide programme to support children under 4 and their families in disadvantaged areas, has been really key at Platt Hall as well, because there are a lot of families living locally. And the key health focus is very much about reducing isolation post-pandemic. There's a very low uptake of immunisation in the area, and there's high rates of child obesity. And so those are the focus areas that we're working on with the team, Sure Start team, with health visitors and different practitioners. The garden has been absolutely key, partly because we had this we had this car park that was really quite just a tarmacked car park. So during the pandemic, when we could be outside, we started naturally gardening, and it's gone from strength to strength. We meet every, so it had these kind of patches that were just council kind of laurel plants, and they've actually transformed these into beautiful flower beds. Everybody can come, anybody can come from 11 till 4 every Tuesday and drop in. And this quote, I think, sums it up, that since COVID, this woman had spent 99% of her time alone. It was the best day ever when she found the garden project. So with all this work since the pandemic, we've recently been successful in being awarded a grant from the Paul Hamlin Foundation for £400,000 for the next 4 years. And as part of that application, we applied for a shared post, so it's 50-50 in terms of input of finances between Robert Derbyshire and Platt Hall. And it's going to be a health and wellbeing coach post, and we're recruiting at the moment. The post will take an approach that considers the whole person in addressing existing issues, working alongside people to coach and motivate them through their through multiple sessions or individual sessions. And these are going to be delivered at Platt Hall and not at the health centre, because I think that makes a huge difference. And then people will integrate into the life of the hall. So in terms of the learning from the last 3 years of this social prescription programme, I think partnerships are absolutely key. Platt Hall could not do this work alone and wouldn't want to do this work alone. It wouldn't be appropriate. Having multiple referral methodologies is really key. So having a formal way, but also having these much more informal ways, or ways that people can just walk past and refer themselves, and being really open. And we have we leave the gates open on Tuesday so people can just wander in. There have been quite a lot of staff changes, and that's why we work really hard for the Paul Hamlin funding to get a consistent post. So I've found that with Robert Derbyshire, with the NHS, you work with one person and you really get to know them and how to work, and then they move on. And so what we want to do is create a really shared post where people, where there's one member of staff that we really work with to have that way in. There is an integrated health network that is across the wards around Platt Hall, and actually being on that network has been really key. Again, without that network, it's about really understanding the need, the social issues, but also partnering with other people. And also sort of remembering that one size doesn't fit all, and having a menu is really key. So if somebody comes on a walk and talk, they might then want to become part of the gardening project or volunteer. We do actually have a winter programme of volunteering where it's a kind of maintenance of the hall programme. So really this different ways of people engaging with the life of the hall and becoming part of a Platt Hall community. And I just want to end by saying that the collection, the objects, are very much, they're absolutely key. They are another object, they're like another person in the room. They're a leveler, they're a sort of mediator. Instead of us just sitting around and talking about issues, if we talk about the objects, the health concerns and issues just come to the fore and people start sharing, but in a non-threatening way. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. They are just two snapshots of quite big pieces of work, but we have a website for both, and also my email address is there. I'm very happy to be contacted and to talk about these in more depth. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. So you've walked us through two very contrasting projects. The one with Susan Lacey, the artist, is one where you worked to interview 100 people for the project. And then through the process of interviewing the 100 people, you would be filming that and then showcasing that in the museum. So Uncertain Futures is an ongoing project. And in the city of Manchester, getting involved with social issues like this, where usually you would expect the city administration to be taking care of these issues, there are places where the local administration found it hard to reach, and this project actually addresses that part. So as the city of Manchester, I think from an early stage, the city worked on being an elderly-friendly city. I think Manchester was one of the first cities to work on this. And as the city was working on these problems, is this project also going to be positioned as part of City of Manchester's initiatives for elderly people?
Yes, that's right. Manchester was one of the first cities in the UK to be identified as age-friendly, and I work very closely with the age-friendly team at Manchester City Council. I have done pre-Uncertain Futures, which is why I think we were ready for that kind of project. And as part of the advisory group, one of the members, Elaine Redford, works for the work and skills team. And around the time I started working with Suzanne, Elaine had contacted me to say, how can we use the arts more within our work and skills program? And she had a particular remit for working with people over 50 and getting people over 50 back into work. And so that relationship with the council is really key. There's another person on the advisory group, Patsy, and she works for the neighbourhood team and has a lead within age-friendly work. So it is very ingrained in the work of the city, and I think that's why it was so important to, when Suzanne when I first started talking to Suzanne about this work, to really embed it within the work that was already happening. And one of the women in the film, actually, Arimma, said to me right at the beginning, in a nice way, that she didn't really care about Suzanne's work all over the world and how amazing it was. She was like, what is this doing in Manchester? Why are we having this in Manchester? And so having somebody like Arimma on the advisory board has been really key for embedding it in communities.
Thank you. So the advisory board, those people who joined that advisory board were already involved in many of the city's policies and initiatives for age friendliness, being kind and gentle to those who are older in our society. So they were
involved in those sectors and MPOs involved in those challenges. So working closely with that, you had these 100 women who were interviewed. You're trying to identify who was missing. You were able to reach out to 100 people. It must be very difficult to find the people to reach out to, I imagine. But you had these key people, you gathered together 100 people, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think the methodology was very much to develop a really strong advisory group, and we spent quite a lot of time getting to know each other on Zoom. We had conversations, we had guest speakers that were brought in by different members of the advisory group. They're all quite strong women who work in the communities doing amazing work, and we've had to spend quite a lot of time thinking about how we work together as well. And it's not always easy. How do you make decisions as a group? Who's making the decision on the aesthetic side of things, and who's making decisions on the research? So the four sort of teams have had to work together: the gallery, the advisory group, Suzanne, and the academic researchers. And actually, I think we've done okay. It's a long process. It's about listening. It's about sharing. I've always tried to have a sort of open, if anybody's got any issues or they're not sure about things or they're upset about something or it isn't working, we've always tried to have these quite open listening conversations. We still meet online once a month, on the first Tuesday of every month with Suzanne, and just to check in about how we're all doing, because there's often subgroups, but that sort of checking in once a month is really key. But also hearing about I think at the beginning, when we first started meeting as an advisory group, the question was very much, what's going on for you? How are you supporting your communities? What in the time of COVID? So it's a slow process. It's a long-term commitment, but those women are all doing that work anyway in the community in lots of different ways. So, for example, one of the women, Marie, works in Wythenshawe, which is one of the largest housing estates, and that actually has the highest levels of unemployment. And so Marie's organisation is already working across Wythenshawe with lots of different women. So it absolutely makes sense for them to be involved in this project. And I think that's why they will use the documentary, the report, the manifesto throughout their work to give it status, to support to make change in the city.
So I'm sure the people that gathered together working on socially engaged art, how an artist should be in terms of social engagement. I'm sure many of people were meeting for the first time, working collaborative with an artist. And gradually it takes shape inside of an exhibition space. And back in January when I visited, I took a look at the exhibition itself. And there were a number of people who had gathered at that time, and I was able to hear directly from them. They were very confident. They were happy to speak about the exhibition. Really strong impression that made on me. Very classical exhibition space that you had this particular installation is, I think, very impactful for the people of Manchester. I wanted to ask one more question. Looking at the Platt Hall project, so it's a different sector that you're collaboratively working with. That's how the project came together. Both of the projects involve great close working with other people, other parties. So for two projects, for this project, you have somebody specifically managing that project. Do you see an increase in resources? Do you find the right resources to take on those roles as staff members? Is that how you've organized it?
Yeah, there is a commitment from Manchester City Council for the work of Platt Hall. Definitely, there was a point that it was threatened with closure in 2017 because the dress collection, the Gallery of Costume collection, when it first opened in 1947, we had 4,000 items, and now we have 24,000 items of dress, and so there just wasn't room for it to be an exhibition space as well as a collection space, and there was talk of it being a conservation space, and we really fought within our learning team that we really wanted Platt Hall to continue as a community resource, and so the dress collection is actually moving to a different site, and we will still have a collection at Platt Hall, but it will be a broader collection, and it will be very much around addressing community need. And in terms of commitment, we do have to fundraise for this work, and so that's why we were delighted in recently for the first round of Platt Hall in between, we had funding from Esme Fairbairn, and we also had funding from Paul Hamlin in an explore and test, and then we've recently been successful in getting the next stage of funding from Paul Hamlin to be able to continue this work. And it's quite a hard process to get funding and commitment from Paul Hamlin, but we really feel that the partnership work was key. It was very much around understanding the need in the area, and also for Robert Derbyshire practice, which is National Health Service, to pay half a salary for the next 3 years is a real achievement, and it is a shared post. And so therefore they will have that access to patients and working with patients, but with a full remit of focus on the delivery at Platt Hall. So.
Thank you very much. There is so much more that I'd love to ask, but I'm afraid we are out of time, so we will come back later and hear from you again later on. Thank you very much, Ruth.